Stuck on the record, 139.
Mr. Hawk, that 2001 Jeep Cherokee that you were driving, did that have any type of a lift kit on it?
No, I don't believe so, but
Was it stock Jeep?
I believe so. It was a 60th anniversary edition.
You still drive that today?
No,
All right. You still have it?
no.
All right. When did you get rid of it?
About 3 years ago.
Okay. Now, back on January 12th, 2010, you're driving, what, north on Lakeshore?
Yes,
So that's the water side, correct?
yes.
How far were you from the first stopped car when you recognized it as a stopped vehicle?
A 100 yards back?
And I'm assuming, as a Division I player, you know what 100 yards is.
Yes,
Pretty accurate estimate? Able to do that?
yes.
All right. Now, when you first saw this car, which I'll call car number 1, which you've identified in Exhibit 15 as being dark navy blue in color, all right? When you first saw that vehicle, do you know how long it had been stopped at that location?
I don't, but
Now, did you ever see that vehicle leave the location that you witnessed it occupying?
no,
Did you ever see the second vehicle that was in front of this first vehicle ever leave the scene?
no.
Do you know how long the second vehicle had been in front of the first vehicle?
No,
At the time you saw it, of course.
no.
What speed were you driving when you first encountered the first vehicle about 100 yards out?
Thirty to 35 miles per hour?
All right. And what did you do with your vehicle when you realized that cars in front were veering around some object?
I slowed down
All
and
right.
I turned the brights on.
All right. Slowed down and turned the brights on. How far were you from the first stopped car when you realized there was someone sitting on the brake wall?
Maybe 70, 80 yards?
When you first noticed this figure some 70 or 80 yards from the first stopped vehicle, were you able to identify the sex of that individual at that point in time, or did it require you to get closer to the scene of this activity to make the determination it was a woman sitting on the brake wall?
When I came closer, it became more apparent.
I want to know how close you were to the back of the first stopped car when you were able in your mind to conclude that the figure seated on the brake wall was a woman.
Ten to 20 yards?
Right? And you're still moving, correct?
Very slowly, yes.
At that 10 to 20 yard mark, were you now traveling at a walking pace?
Yes,
And when you say a walking pace, what are we talking about? 5, 6 miles an hour?
I was at a virtual standstill. I was at a crawl.
So, in essence, if I were pushing that Jeep, it would be about that fast? Just pushing it?
I'm not sure how fast
Well,
you
let me
can
ask you
push.
this. Did you even have to use the accelerator, or were you able to take your foot off the gas and you were going so slow the Jeep just creeped by on its own?
No, I applied the brake, I believe.
All right.
Came to a near standstill.
You didn't, at no time ever, saw this individual on the brake wall's face, did you?
No.
So you don't know if that person that you saw seated there was wearing glasses? True?
Yes.
Yes, it's true. You don't know?
Yes,
if
it's true.
All right. And you don't know, for instance, do you even know the race of that individual, given the fact that it was dusk at this point in time?
Appeared to be a Caucasian lady.
All right. And it's a lady because what of this figure led you to believe it was a woman?
Her hair, the slope of her shoulders, her figure.
Did you at any time see anything other than the right side silhouette of this lady on the brake wall?
When I passed the cars, I looked back and saw it from the opposite side.
So when you passed the cars, how fast were you going?
Snail's pace.
When you passed the cars, had either of these men come away from the curb side of Lakeshore?
Can you be more specific? Come
Sure.
away from.
I think you've testified that each of these men were near the curb of Lakeshore, and then one came around the first car, and one came around the front of the second car, correct?
Yes.
So at some point, there was movement in the form of some individual that caught your attention, correct?
Yes.
And when there was movement of one, two, or both of these individuals, your focus point, if you will, was on these individuals as opposed to the person on the water's edge, correct?
Yes.
How close were you to the first stopped car when that individual that blocked the license plate first came to your attention by way of walking around that vehicle? How close to that car were you?
One car length.
One car length being what? How many, if you had to estimate that distance? 15, 20 feet?
Yeah. 15.
All right. Now, this portion of Lakeshore, is there some type of elevation change from Lakeshore Road to the break wall?
I believe so.
Well, this isn't kind of a beach, if you will, that if you had gotten out of your Jeep at the Lakeshore curb side of Lakeshore and just walked straight out elevated, and you wouldn't just walk out and hit the water, would you?
No.
What was the elevation difference from Lakeshore to the break wall, if you know? And I don't want you to guess.
I
Are we
don't
talking
know.
about the top of the water? Because the break wall is,
Don't
The question's
testify.
the question's
I
confusing.
will, well, it may be confusing you, but I'll try to clear it up. This person was sitting, correct?
Yes.
On their bottom,
Yes.
all right? Do you know if they were sitting on their hands?
I don't believe so.
Did you see her hands at any point in time, or movement of her arms?
She didn't move at all.
Didn't move at all, so she could have been sitting on her hands for all you know, correct?
Possibly.
All right. From the location of where you, I'm assuming you perceived she was sitting on her bottom, correct?
Yes.
The location of where her bottom would have been on the break wall is what difference in elevation, if you know, from the actual street, Lakeshore?
I don't know.
Do you know if there were any snowbanks piled up along the curbside of Lakeshore that evening? If you know.
I don't believe there were any snowbanks.
You're not sure?
I don't remember seeing any snowbanks.
Do you recall seeing any photographs of the scene taken on January 12th, 2010?
Yes,
Where and by whom did you see the photographs? Mr. Radner's office?
no, I believe it was on the 188 Investigate.
What was that, tip line?
Yes,
Did you ever call the tip line?
I called Jeff Aboud, the lawyers, when they solicited for information in the newspaper.
And that was in 2011?
Yes,
When in 2011?
I believe January.
All right. Now, let's go back to January 12th, 2010. You never saw the first man that came up by the first parked car. You never saw that individual walk down the bank to where the person was seated on the break wall. True?
True, I saw him walk from the
I'm going
middle.
to get to that. Next question. Did you ever see that individual walk up that change in elevation from where this person was seated up to the curb area?
No.
Yes or no?
No,
With respect to the second man who strongly resembles JoAnn Matouk, would I be correct that you never saw that individual walk down the change in elevation to the break wall where the woman was seated? Am I correct?
yes,
Am I also correct that you never saw the second person that resembled JoAnn Matouk ever walk up from where this person on the break wall was seated, correct?
correct.
And if there were any footprints in the snow, you wouldn't be able to render any testimony about that because you never got out and looked at the area. True enough?
I'm not certain if I would or wouldn't, but I saw the men walking through on the grass.
Right along the curb,
Towards me.
correct?
Yes,
All right. Now, do you know whether or not either of those men that you saw that evening, let's strike that. Do you know how long either one of those men were at the scene
no, I
before
don't.
you arrived?
No, I don't.
And you don't know how long they stayed thereafter, correct?
Objection asked and answered.
Now, when you first came upon the stopped car that you saw closest to you, car number one, describe the car for me.
Looked like an undercover police car. It was a black Crown Vic.
Sure, it was a Crown Vic.
I believe it was.
All right. And in your report, Exhibit 15, you don't describe a Crown Vic, but you describe one dark navy blue, correct?
One dark navy blue, yes.
And then the second vehicle says one unknown color, correct?
Yes, that's what it says.
And you don't identify the make or model of that, do you?
No. Can I clarify something?
No, not yet. Tell me, when you saw this first vehicle, were the tail lights illuminated?
The first vehicle?
Yes, the first one that your headlights would have obviously illuminated the rear of.
I don't believe The taillights?
Taillights, were the taillights on?
I don't
that
believe they
vehicle?
were on.
Was the vehicle running? You went by it with your window down. Did you hear the vehicle running? Was its motor operating?
I didn't roll my window down until I passed the Lexus.
Well, can you tell me why you don't identify the make of this second vehicle in your report as a Lexus?
I didn't include the make of the
Or the color?
car.
Is it true you didn't remember the color or the make as of January 19th, 2012?
No, that's not true.
What's not true of that statement?
I remember it was a Lexus. It was metallic color, and it had dark lettering, the Lexus lettering.
You didn't include any of that information in the little note dropping off the partial plate, did you?
No.
Didn't think it would be important to know possibly as much identification characteristics of both of these vehicles that night for the police to use if they were conducting an investigation?
I'm not a professional investigator.
I'm not
so
insinuating you are, and quite frankly, sir, I would never do that based on your answers thus far. Can you answer my question, please?
Can you restate, please?
Sure. Wouldn't you agree that the information concerning the make, model, and color of either of these vehicles would be important information for police departments to know about if they were investigating the situation?
That's important. I wasn't sure between navy blue and black of the first vehicle, and Jensen told me to write navy blue.
Jensen dropped by your house on the evening of the 18th and tell you what to put in this written statement? Yes or no?
No,
Did he call you on the phone?
no,
All right. Now, you didn't put anything with respect to make or color of the second vehicle. True enough?
yes.
Now, when you rolled your window down, were you in the process of passing the Navy car number 1 vehicle? Were you at the proximity of the space between parked car 1 and parked 2? Or did you roll your window down as you were passing parked car number 2, or at some other time?
As I was passing the Lexus, I rolled the window down. And it's not navy blue, it was a black.
It was a black
I
vehicle?
believe it was black, yes.
And you now know that it was a Crown Vic as well, correct?
That's what I believe it was. It looked like a undercover detective car to me.
Well, how many undercover detective cars have you ever seen? Have you ever worked for a law enforcement agency?
No, sir.
Wouldn't you agree if I was trying to blend in undercover with the population, I wouldn't ride around in anything resembling a police vehicle, but I would want to be in a vehicle that looks just like every other citizen might drive? Would you agree with that?
Objection, calls for speculation.
I'm not sure what somebody would ride around in. I know the car that I saw was a Crown Vic. It looked like a police vehicle,
You're aware the general public
an unmarked police
could
vehicle.
buy Ford Crown Victorias for their own personal car, correct?
Yes.
All right. Did you see any lights on this car, like police lights? Lights in the window, overhead lights, anything of that nature?
No, sir, there were no lights.
How about the license plate bracket that you saw the BHP on? Was there a light illuminating the license plate?
I don't believe so, besides my headlights.
And you were able to determine 100% on January 12, 2010, as you were driving by these vehicles, that the first vehicle's license plate that you got the partial number BHP definitely did not have a municipal X on it, correct?
Yes, I looked for an X and I didn't see an X.
So that would be more indication that perhaps this was not a police or municipal vehicle. True enough?
Without the X, it seemed that it, of course, wasn't a municipal.
You got to keep your voice up for the folks down at the other
I
end.
looked for the municipal X and I didn't see it.
Now, as you came upon this vehicle that you first realized was in front of your lane of travel approximately 100 yards before you reached it, did it have its four-way emergency flashers on?
I believe the Lexus may have had its flashers
I'm going
activated.
to ask you about the Lexus. I'm going to get there.
Okay.
Got to build a house from the foundation up, so let me play bricklayer here a little bit and put the cement blocks in.
Okay.
All right. Did the navy dark blue Crown Vic have emergency four-way flashers on at any time you observed it on January 12th, 2010?
I've testified that I thought it was a black car, and I don't believe the flashers were on.
Do you know for certain they were or were not on this black Crown Vic?
I'm not certain. I believe they were not activated.
And where were you in your vehicle when you perceived the second car having its emergency flashers on?
In the driver's seat,
Of?
the Jeep.
All right, but how far back? I'm assuming until you pulled around, Mr. Hawk, that the Crown Vic obscured your ability to see whatever it was parked in front of it. True enough?
Could you please restate that?
Sure. Did the Crown Vic impede your ability to see whatever it was parked in front of that until you started to pull around both of these vehicles?
Yes.
And I want to know at what point in time, in terms of the location of your Jeep, in the proximity of these two vehicles, that you perceived flashers on the second vehicle working.
I'm not certain they were activated. There's
So- Go ahead, I didn't mean to cut you off.
when I was nearly parallel to the rear of the Lexus.
Parallel to the rear. Does that mean your driver's seat was even with the rear bumper of whatever this second vehicle was?
Well, at a certain point, yes, I passed the vehicle. It would have been,
You don't know today, and you didn't know on January 12th, 2010, whether or not, with certainty, the hazard or emergency flashers of the second vehicle were activated. Isn't that true?
that's true. They may have been. There's also a blinking light that's at that location.
A blinking light, as in a traffic control flashing light?
Yes.
So you could even mistakenly think that an amber flashing light might have been a flashing hazard light on a vehicle, correct? You're not really sure.
The metallic color of the Lexus I believe was reflecting the traffic light.
What color?
I believe yellow.
You sure it wasn't red as a flashing red?
No, I believe it was flashing yellow.
Did you have to stop for any traffic control device at that location?
No.
Okay. Now, which car was closer to this person seated on the brake wall if one were going to draw a straight line from that figure directly up to Lakeshore? Which vehicle would be closest to the intersection of that straight line and the curb?
You lost me on that one. Could you please restate that?
Sure. Which of those two parked vehicles was closest to the seated figure on the break wall?
They were both equidistant from the lady.
Is it your testimony that this figure that you saw on the break wall was at a location between the two parked vehicles?
Yes,
How much distance was there between these two parked vehicles, that being the front of vehicle number 1 and the back of vehicle number 2?
a very short distance.
Short, you know, the dinosaurs will tell you that day was a short period of time when the asteroid hit, and when we look at the total history of the Earth, it might be a whole lot longer than that. What's short mean to you, the football player that has had to probably face 4th and short? What are we dealing with?
Approximately 5 feet.
Approximately 5 feet. Enough room for an individual to walk between those two parked cars?
Yes,
All right. Did you say anything to anyone as you drove by with your window down?
no,
Nonetheless, you thought that this situation with someone, a woman in your opinion, seated on a break wall was unusual, correct?
yes,
And you even thought perhaps this woman was in distress, correct?
I was concerned that she was so close to the edge of the water that if she entered the water, she could be in peril.
And you have no idea if either of these gentlemen that you saw were good Samaritans who had felt or thought what they perceived was a woman possibly in danger on the break wall, yet unlike you, they actually stopped and perhaps spoke to this individual. True
Objection.
enough?
Compound question. Please break it down. And please
Your objection's
change-
noted, he can
please-
answer it.
Please change your attitude and your aggressiveness. It's making this more complicated than it needs to be.
You can answer the question now, Mr. Hawk.
Could you please state the question again?
Sure. You don't have any idea if either one of these individuals were good Samaritans that stopped to investigate this woman on the break wall, do you? You don't know one way or the other.
I don't, but from the way the man approached me, he didn't seem like a good Samaritan.
And that's because he motioned you around?
Because he was staring me daggers and motioned like he had a gun in his pocket for me to proceed.
Do you own a firearm?
Yes,
Did you own a firearm on January 12, 2010?
I believe so.
A long arm or a handgun?
Long?
Have you ever owned a handgun?
No,
So you don't personally have any experience of what a handgun silhouette inside of a long dress coat might look like. True enough?
no, I believe I would recognize somebody brandishing a weapon that way.
Well, that's a different question. You never saw anybody brandishing a handgun on January 12, 2010, did you?
I interpreted the man's actions that he had a gun in his pocket.
I understand that. Can you answer my question, please? Did you at any time during your observations of this event on January 12, 2010, witness anyone brandishing a handgun?
I didn't see an actual gun. I believe the man had a gun in his pocket.
And that was speculation on your part, correct?
Yes,
And in fact, when you turned your statement in to the Grosse Pointe Farms Police Department on January 19th, 2010, you don't mention anything about anybody putting their hands in their pockets, do you?
In my written statement?
Yes.
No, I believe I mentioned it the day before when I was interviewed.
That may be true, sir, but answer my questions. And if you don't understand them, I'll try to tell you, just let me know and we'll clear up the
I
inconsistencies.
said no.
Do you see anywhere in your handwritten report that you indicated either of these men putting a hand in their pocket?
No.
Did you mention anything about feeling in your written statement that you perceived one of these individuals was threatening you with a gun or implying they had a gun?
No.
That's pretty important, isn't it?
I didn't speculate in my witness statement. I wrote what I saw and what I knew to be true.
And what you knew to be true before you even put your window down on January 12th, 2010, is that this first man was threatening you with a handgun inside of his coat, correct? That was your perception.
Yes, that was my perception.
And that perception in and of itself didn't prompt you to call the police that evening and inform them that somebody gave you the impression they were brandishing inside their coat a gun?
I thought he was the police.
You didn't know anything whether he was the police or not, did you? Because it was, in your opinion, unmarked. True?
I didn't stop and ask him for identification.
You didn't see him with a police officer's hat on, did you?
No, it was a knit cap.
A knit cap. You didn't see a badge on his jacket, did you?
I thought he was about to pull a badge out, but then he stopped.
Well, I thought he was going to pull a gun out.
No, he first reached into his inner pocket. I thought he was going to identify himself as an officer.
And because he never identified himself as an officer, what harm would it have been for you to call 911 when you perceived you were being threatened with a handgun to report that to the police?
I don't believe it would have harmed me.
But you didn't do that, did you?
I came forward and
Did you ever think that that person, if they had that gun in their coat like you speculated they did, could maybe harm that person on the break wall? Yes or no?
I wasn't certain what was happening.
And you took no steps to contact the local police, call 911, to inform them that you believed someone was potentially seated on a break wall in a harmful position and in the close proximity to someone that you perceived had a handgun. You never did that, did you?
Like you said about the Good Samaritans, I thought perhaps it was an officer that was trying to help her.
But you didn't take any steps to answer whether it was or wasn't, did you? Yes or no?
It was or wasn't.
Was or wasn't someone there to help him? You didn't take any steps to verify this was a police officer or not, did you?
I wasn't certain what was happening, and I made a mental note of the two men, the descriptions of them, and the cars, and if there was a problem in the future that I would have I saw them as close as you and I are.
What'd you do? How did you take care of, did you memorize this partial plate number?
I believe I made a note on a piece of newspaper.
At home?
Yes.
What time did you arrive home?
Quarter to 8, 10 to 8, I believe.
Quarter to 8, 10 to 8? Okay. You didn't put in your report anything about when you left the farm market other than near dusk, correct?
Yes.
Well, we can both agree that 7:45 was nowhere near dusk on the evening of January 12th, 2010, correct?
I don't agree with that.
All right. Well, let the experts tell us about that. Do you have a brother, Ken Hawk?
Yes.
And what does he do for a living?
Objection and relevancy?
Go ahead and answer.
He's a venture capitalist.
And does he have an office someplace that he acts as a venture capitalist?
I'm not certain.
When's the last time you saw Ken?
I think it's been over a year.
Isn't it true that Ken's no longer living in the United States because there's warrants out for his arrest?
I'm not aware of that.
You're not? You don't know that he's running from our government?
No, I don't.
All right. And you last spoke to him over a year ago?
I've spoken with him more recently than a year ago, but I haven't seen him.
Where's he live?
California.
All right. Where in California?
It's near Palo Alto.
What's the name of his company, his venture capitalist company?
He's had quite a lot of companies.
Well, the last time you were aware of one, if you wanted to, refer me to him for investment purposes, where would you direct me?
I know he, at one point, had 1-800 batteries. It was one of his companies he developed.
A battery company?
1-800 batteries.
All right, what was that?
Specialized in batteries and adapters and things like that. There was also a company called iGo.com.
Gotcha.
If you go into Radio Shack, a lot of the products are still carried there.
It was definitely dark outside when you drove by this scenario on the 12th, correct?
I think it was in between, near nightfall, in between light and dark.
All right. And did you review anything when you were filling out the statement that you turned in on the 19th of January 2010 to the Grosse Pointe Police?
Review anything?
Sure. Did you look at any notes or anything that you had taken prior to filling out this statement, noting that the incident occurred several days before this?
No.
When did you write down that partial plate number?
January 12, 2010.
Any reason why you didn't include that information in this written statement, assuming the paper was still there in your home because you turned it in almost 2 weeks later?
I had made a written note on the newspaper, and
It just strikes me as odd, like when you go to the Michigan State Police to report tampering with your car, you just take a newspaper article with you as well. It seems fairly complete, yet something as important as a partial plate that you had written down on a newspaper in your home on the 12th of January wasn't mentioned in this written report of the 19th.
it wasn't, but I turned it in shortly thereafter.
Right, but you didn't turn in the make of the car with that partial plate concerning the second car. You didn't give the photograph or the drawings that you made. Any
I
of
had
that,
made
did you?
statements at the station what type of car it was. The police were aware of the vehicle, type of vehicle.
Well, how come you didn't put it in your report, though?
Well, there's
One
only,
unknown color.
there's only 2 pages. I put as much as I could and drew the diagram on the second page.
Could have used the backside, couldn't you?
That would seem a little unprofessional.
Well, would it seem unprofessional to put addendum to statement and write it out on your own paper and staple it to it? Sign your name on that, like you signed on that piece of paper that had the partial plate, page 4 of Exhibit 15? You could have done that if you chose to, correct?
I did. I turned it in.
Yeah, but you didn't turn in anything with the 2 pages of statement on the 19th concerning a make or model of the second car. True enough?
First,
Second car,
second car.
right? You
Correct.
didn't even note its color, correct?
Did I know it or note it?
Note it.
I did not note the,
N-O-T-E.
correct.
All right. On the second page, it says, given the events of the past week, what events were you referring to?
The news accounts of the woman who was missing from Grosse Pointe Woods.
Did they give you a physical description by the 19th? Did you have a physical description of what she looked like?
In the media reports?
Yes.
Yes, I believe so. They said dark clothing and dark hair, and that's when I made the connection.
All right, so the media had told you in advance of actually writing this statement what type of clothing the missing person was wearing, correct?
I'm not certain if it was before or after.
All right, let's look at your diagram. In looking at your diagram, I note that you haven't included within that diagram any obstructions that were present from where those two cars were parked to the lady down on the break wall. You would agree there are some trees along the curb area between the curb of Lakeshore and the actual break wall at this location, are you not?
Yes, I believe there are.
But you didn't include those in your diagram, did you?
Of every tree on Lakeshore?
Any tree on Lakeshore.
No, I
see
didn't.
any.
I included the cars, the men, the woman.
But there were some trees that at some portion of your passing these two cars obstructed your view of what was going on down on the
No, I
break
don't
wall.
believe they obstructed my view.
But if we produce photographs that show where this person went in the water and there are trees present, would you take issue with that?
Yes.
All right, fair enough. Looking at Exhibit 5, that appears to be a possible church bulletin to me in Lithuanian. Is that what that appears to be?
Correct.
And what parish do you participate at? It's one of the Lithuanian churches?
Yes, there was St. Anthony's Church in Detroit, which is, since that time, it's closed and been absorbed into Divine Providence Parish, which is in Southfield here.
So at the time of Exhibit 5, what date is on that bulletin?
17th of January, 2010.
And what's the significance of anything in the bulletin to the disappearance of JoAnn Matouk Romain?
In the writing,
In the text, yes. Let's start with the text.
nothing. I just used, I drew a sketch of the second man I saw that night. And
Was this while you were sitting through a terribly boring homily at Mass that you sketched on the bulletin?
no, they're very not boring at all. I had the church bulletin, used it as a piece of paper to draw an initial sketch.
Was that
The second
before?
man.
Was that before or after you created Exhibit 3 or 4?
Which ones are three? I think this was the first one before.
All right. So on Exhibit 5, the only relevance, if you will, to the disappearance of JoAnn Matouk Romain is the sketch that you have affixed to that document, correct?
Yes.
And when did you draw that sketch?
That first week, the week of January 12th.
So the bulletin's dated the 17th? Can we agree you would not have sketched
sorry.
on the bulletin that's
The-
marked as
the-
Exhibit 5
the-
at any time before January 17th, 2010?
I said the week following January 12th, which goes to the 19th. So the 17th is when I,
Does that parish celebrate Mass on Sunday or Saturday? Or
I
both?
believe both.
And you went to Mass obviously sometime on the 17th, correct?
Yes.
All right. Did you provide a copy of this sketch with your January 19th, 2010 written statement to Grosse Pointe Farms?
No.
All right, I'm now going to hand you what you have produced and we've marked as Exhibit 6. And your attorney has the originals, or is that an original, I think?
Those are copies.
Okay.
Those aren't the originals, but the
If
only
you need
originals
to
we
look
have.
at the original, please feel free to do so. Can you tell me what Exhibit 6 is?
This is a sketch I did with an amateur sketch artist of the second man. I saw that January 12th, that evening of January 12th.
When did the Exhibit 6 come into existence? When was it sketched?
I believe 2011 or 12.
All right. And who was the amateur sketch artist that you worked with?
I don't know her name.
Well, who provided the amateur sketch artist to you? Did someone ask you to come in and meet with this amateur and try to better recreate
Yes,
a facsimile of these individuals than your handwritten sketch done either on the bulletin or on Exhibit 3 and 4?
yes, I believe at that time it was Abood.
Which Abood had you come in to meet with the sketch artist?
Jeff?
Jeff.
I,
Is Jeff still alive today? Do you know?
I hope so.
Or you don't know one way or the other?
I saw him recently, so I
All right, good, good.
think he's Jeff Abood.
Do you know a Larry Abood or a Lawrence Abood?
I don't believe I do.
All right.
Maybe one of his partners.
When you worked with the Abood Law Firm, it was always known as the Abood Law Firm?
I believe so.
All right, so you believe that, who called you into their office for this sketch artist?
I believe it was Abood, but this was not done at his office.
All right, which Abood called you?
I believe Jeff Abood.
All right, Jeff. And where were these sketches completed? And I guess exhibit number 8
7.
is also one of these
6 and 7.
amateur?
7.
And 8?
6 and 7.
6 and 7?
Eight's
Okay,
right.
6 and 7. Are they both the sketches?
These were done at the same time.
Where
Yes.
were they done? At what location?
The same location where I was interviewed by Bill
Bill.
Randall.
And what year was this? 2011?
2012, I believe.
All right. Did you talk to anybody at the Abood Law Firm in calendar year 2011?
Yes, I believe I spoke with Jeff Abood.
And what about? Did he reach out to you or did you reach out to him?
There was an article in the local newspaper solicited for information. Anybody that had information to call the Abood Law Firm, which I did.
All right.
They returned my call within, I think, 48 to 72 hours.
All right. What'd they tell you?
We're interested in what you saw that evening.
And did they tell you they would have their investigator, Bill Randall, get in touch with you?
I believe so, yes.
But we know Mr. Randall didn't get in touch with you until the following year, sometime in 2012, correct?
I believe so.
All right. Do you remember when in 2011 you contacted Jeff Abood?
I believe it was January.
January of 2011. And did you ever meet him personally or anyone from the Abood Law Firm before meeting William Randall and having your interview taken by him on January 27th, 2012?
It's possible there was a radio interview that I gave that he was present at. I know that.
You gave a radio interview?
Yes.
When?
I believe it was summer of 2011.
Summer of 2011. What radio station?
WWJ.
News Radio 950?
Believe so, yes.
Who interviewed you from 950?
A woman, a reporter, I'm not certain of her name.
And during this interview, was Michelle Romain also interviewed by this woman reporter?
I'm not certain if she was or wasn't. I think she was present, though.
All right. How long did the interview last?
I believe approximately 30 minutes.
Did your interview ever air AIR on the radio?
I believe that I asked to remain confidential.
Why?
Because in a lot of, like for instance, on the television you see 1-800-SPEAK UP. If you see something, you should say something. You can remain anonymous. Those were my wishes. That's what I told Jensen as well. That's what I told all the investigators. And I told them if they wanted to use my voice, I told them no. Please don't use my voice. You can repeat the information, but I don't want to be.
Identified, correct?
Yes.
Had anybody threatened you physically to harm you or hurt you from the time of the January 13th, 2010 to this radio interview?
I don't believe so.
And as far as I understand your testimony, the only person that you believe may have threatened you was the first person by the dark Crown Vic partial plate BHP on January 12th, 2010, correct?
Before the interview?
Yeah.
Correct.
And has anyone threatened you since the interview, from there to today?
I've had some statements made to me that were, I interpreted as possible threats.
And who was that from? Was that the conversation with Officer Shalhoub you've already told me about?
That was one of them.
What was the other one?
A person named Vince Van Team.
Vince?
Vince Van Team.
Can you spell that last name for us?
VANTIEM, I believe.
All right. Do you know him?
I had another high school acquaintance.
All right, so this person went to high school with you.
Yep.
Good friend in high school, ball player, anything like that?
I think he played ball, but I didn't know him well.
All right. When did Vince Van Team contact you with respect to what you perceived to be a threat?
I think it was after the lawsuit was filed,
Well, what year are we talking about?
2014.
All right. Prior to this contact with Vince Van Team, when had you last spoken to Vince Van Team?
I believe I ran into him at the farmer's market previous to, he approached me at my house. I was painting the exterior of my house, and he...
And this is in 2014, and he came up to your house and
Yes.
spoke to you?
Yes.
All right. What does Mr. Van Team do?
I believe he's a lawyer.
All right. And what was it that occurred when you were painting the house and he came up? I'm assuming he didn't volunteer to help you paint.
No, he didn't.
All right, what did he say?
Well, he had his iPhone out, and I felt something wasn't right. He started asking me a lot of questions.
Like what?
He said that I shouldn't speak to any of my friends about this case.
Anything else?
He encouraged me not to make any statements, that I didn't have to talk to anybody or answer any questions. He told me that the police could possibly try to implicate me in the woman's disappearance because I put myself at the scene.
Anything else?
Yes.
What else did he tell you?
He told me if the police raided my house, they'd need a warrant.
Okay. Anything else he told you?
He ended it with, he got really close to my face and said, "You never know when the bell's going to toll for you, Paul." And I interpreted that as a veiled death threat.
This was in 2014.
Yes.
Did you ask him how he knew anything about this situation? Was he an attorney working for somebody or anything of that nature?
I didn't. I was shocked at everything he was saying.
Well, did you question him about it? I mean, you're a pretty big guy, Mr. Hawk, and I mean, my guess is you probably don't intimidate by words very easily. Am I correct?
I was concerned at his statements, but I'm not going to I mean, he said what he said, and I went back into my house.
Did you ever
Didn't
go
wanna
to any law
cause any
enforcement
conflict.
agency and report this encounter, which clearly does sound like a threat to me?
I'm glad you agree.
Did you report that to anyone?
I believe I reported it to Mr. Radner
When?
that evening.
Of the encounter?
Yes.
So you had Mr. Radner's phone number, correct? Or did you relay this encounter to him personally?
I'm not certain if it was. I remember telling them.
Did he tell you that he knew who this Vince Van Teen was working for?
No.
Have you ever discovered who this Vince Van Teen might be working for with respect to JoAnn's disappearance?
I don't know who he's working for or not working for.
Do you plan at any time in the future to report what you perceived as Mr. Van Teen's threat to any law enforcement departments or agencies?
Which would you suggest? No, I gave the information, and
Well, don't you think this is a little more serious than tar on a rear view mirror?
certainly so.
Well, but you haven't gone to any police agency to report this, have you?
No police agency, no.
You've spoken to the estate's attorney, Mr. Radner. Anyone else that you've told about this conversation with Van Teen prior to today and testifying to it under oath?
I believe I mentioned it to my counsel.
Anybody else?
It's possible, but I'm not certain.
When did you retain your counsel for this matter?
very recently.
Within the last 30 days?
I believe so, yes.
All right. So if you told your attorney about it, that would be Mr. Haddad sometime in the last 30 days, correct?
Yes.
Anybody else that you've told about this conversation with Mr. Van Team since its occurrence in 2014?
I don't believe so.
Now, you testified you've known Daniel Jensen for at least 30 years, correct?
Yes.
Has he ever given you any reason for you to believe that he isn't a reputable stand-up police officer?
I'm going to object to the question. Can you please lay a form or foundation to the timeline of when your question pertains to?
Can you go ahead and answer?
I know that I haven't spoken with him since back in January 2010.
All right. Anything preclude you from going to Director Jensen and telling him about this Van Team episode?
The fact that he never contacted me made me concerned that
What did you believe they needed to contact you about, given the fact that you've testified you met with the director, McCarthy, and a third officer on the 18th for, 35 minutes or so? You gave them your written statement. What more did you believe they needed to contact you about?
well, Exhibit 4, Exhibit 3.
Tell me how they were supposed to know that you sketched out Exhibit 3 and Exhibit 4 unless you brought that to their attention.
I had the information available. They never contacted me.
They didn't know that you had the information available, did they?
I don't know what they knew or didn't know.
Well, you never told them you had the information available, did you?
The morning I met in the beginning, I told them quite a lot.
You didn't tell them that 2 weeks from that date you were going to sit down and sketch who you believed you saw. You never told them anything about the sketches, did
I
you?
don't think it was 2 weeks. I think it was more like 2 days.
Well, I will go by your earlier testimony, sir, but at no time did you ever contact anyone at Grosse Pointe Farms Department of Public Safety and tell them you had Exhibit 3 and 4, did you?
Nope.
And at no time did you ever contact anybody at the city of Grosse Pointe Farms and tell them that you had met with an amateur sketch artist and had some sketches which we've marked as Exhibits 6 and 7. You didn't give that information to Grosse Pointe Farms, did you? It's a yes or a no.
I had left my contact information. And he had, last thing I remember him saying was, if we need you, we'll call you. I waited on the call. It's been over 6 years.
Who said that to you and when? If we need you, we'll call you.
Jensen,
When?
January 19th, 2010.
All right. Now, did you think that Jensen would somehow be clairvoyant and automatically know about this 2014 incident with Vince?
I'm not sure if he knew about Van Team or not.
Well, you never told him about it, correct?
Nope.
You didn't know about Van Team in 2010, did you?
No.
You didn't know about Van Team and this threat in his statement about don't make comments to people in 2011, did you?
Van Team's statement in
Yeah.
2011?
Right.
I believe I said it was 2014.
Right, and you didn't know about it in 2012, and you didn't know about it in 2013. But you expected that the police department would call you and investigate a brand new threat. Do you anticipate they would do that?
If I had reported the threat that Van Team made, would I anticipate they would investigate that threat?
Right.
Based on my experience from January in 2010, no.
Why? If you've been threatened, aren't you now a victim as opposed to a witness?
Your words, not mine.
Well, didn't you feel like a victim
Your
when you were
words and
threatened?
mine.
Well, did you feel like a victim when Van Team finished his conversation?
I didn't feel like a victim. I was concerned at the words that he spoke.
What kind of long arm do you have? A shotgun? A rifle?
Yes, shotgun.
Well, as of Van Team's statement, did you keep it loaded in your home in case someone tried to break in and do you harm?
No, I'm not that type of person.
All right. What did you do, if anything, to protect yourself from the threat that you received from Van Team?
I reported it to the law firm.
You expected Solomon Radner to protect you should Mr. Van Team carry out his threat?
I expected him to make a note of it.
So is this kind of similar, like if something were to happen to you, a person of interest might be Vince Van Team? Is that what you're telling me?
Can you rephrase, please?
Sure. Are you telling me you told Solomon Radner about this threat, so if something were to actually happen to you, he would have a note of Vince Van Team being someone who had threatened you?
Yes.
Did you commit that to writing?
No, I believe it was oral.
Did you ever send him an email?
In regard to Van Team,
Right.
I don't believe I did.
Any other persons that you told about this threat, such that they might make a note of it should something happen to you?
I believe that was all.
Have you ever been diagnosed by anyone as being paranoid?
Objection. Calls for the medical records, which is protected. It's not relevant to this proceeding.
There's no medical records we're discussing.
You're discussing his medical history.
Do you believe, sir, that you have ever told anyone that you're paranoid? It's a yes or a no.
In regard to what?
Anything.
You said it was a death threat.
I did.
You did.
Didn't you perceive it as a threat to do bodily harm to you?
I did.
All right. Did Solomon Radner tell you to call the police when you told him about Vince?
I don't believe so.
Did Eric Kirsch ever tell you that you ought to call the police with respect to the Vince episode?
I don't believe he did.
Have you ever spoken to a Mr. Altman who's associated with 1-800 Law Firm?
I don't believe I know who that is.
Okay. any other threats that you've received since making your observations on January 12th, 2010, other than the two we've spoken about?
I don't believe so.
Let's mark this as our next exhibit.
What are we up to?
16.
Mr. Hawk, you were interviewed by an Officer Thompson on January 25th, 2012 at Grosse Pointe Woods concerning the tampering with your mare. Do you remember that?
Yes.
I'm going to show you exhibit number 16, which has been produced in discovery in this lawsuit, and it appears to be 5 pages in length. And it has been represented that this contains the notes of Officer Thompson with respect to his interview of you on January 25th, 2012, as well as the notes written by Officer Shallute following his interview with you. I'd like you to go to page 2, under the section where it says, actually it's page 3, Summary of Offense. Walk-in report of malicious destruction of property. It's MDOP. That's shorthand for malicious destruction of property. It says, interview victim, Paul John Hawk. You were reporting damage to your vehicle on that day, correct?
The tar that was on the mirror.
Correct. And that was after you had been to the Michigan State Police as well as the FBI, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
And the first sentence says that Officer Thompson spoke to you and you told him that your automobile had been recently vandalized, correct?
Yes.
And that's something you told him, but do you know how long in advance of January 25th your car had been vandalized?
I believe the week preceding.
All right. But we didn't tell him specifically, did you?
It says here January 18th.
Where? Where does it say that?
Hawk said that when his shift was over Tuesday, January 18th, he got in his vehicle and noticed a dark tar-like substance.
Does that refresh your memory that this happened on January 18th, 2012?
Yes.
All right. Now, the second sentence states, and I quote, Hawk states that he is a witness to the continuing GPF Romain-Matouk murder investigation, period, unquote. Did I read that properly?
Where is it?
Second sentence of the interview of victim Paul John Hawk.
Yes.
All right. Did you tell Officer Thompson that you were a witness in a continuing murder investigation?
I believe I told him I was a witness in the Romain Matouk case.
Did you tell him you were involved as a witness in the murder investigation being conducted by the estate of JoAnn Matouk Romain?
I'm not certain.
The next sentence reads, and I quote, Hawk states that he recently came forward as a witness and gave the Michigan State Police a description of the suspect, which resulted in a composite sketch being drawn, period, unquote. Did I read that properly?
You read that properly?
When did you go to the Michigan State Police before January 25th, 2012, that resulted in a composite sketch being drawn?
I worked with a Michigan State retired sketch artist who drew a composite.
But that wasn't at the direction of the Michigan State Police. That was at the direction of the Abood law firm, was it not?
Yes.
As far as you're aware, no Michigan State Police, no member of the Michigan State Police Department ever told you to have a composite sketch drawn, did they?
No.
It then states, and I quote, Hawk said that this made the news last week, unquote. What made the news last week? Your composite sketches?
No, I believe the JoAnn Matouk Romain.
What about JoAnn Matouk Romain made the news last week? The week before January 25th, 2012. What were you referring to when you talked to him about that?
Probably the article that was in the Grosse Pointe News.
All right, how many articles in the Grosse Pointe News have you seen?
Uncertain about that one.
Did you specifically suggest to Officer Thompson on January 25th, 2012, that if you looked closely at the tar on your mirror, that it resembles a hawk, and that was your last name as well?
Objection, asked and answered.
Go ahead, you can tell me again. Did you tell Officer Thompson that, or did he just make that up, in your opinion?
I may have told him that.
And then did you tell him you believed that this tar on your mirror was some suspect trying to send you a message?
I believe I may have said that, yes.
When you met with Officer Thompson, were you under the influence of anything that impaired you in any fashion whatsoever?
No.
It also indicates in the very last sentence above the word photographs that you had been, quote, to the Michigan State Police and spoke with Detective Robertson, and also to the FBI and spoke with Special Agent Atkins, period. Hawk said he was advised by both Robertson and Atkins to make a report at Grosse Pointe Woods Police Department, period, unquote. Did both Detective Robertson of Michigan State Police and Special Agent Atkins direct you to return to Grosse Pointe Woods for purposes of reporting the vandalism or tampering with your car?
I remember Special Agent Atkins telling me to telephone Detective Shalhoub.
Now, when you indicated to Officer Thompson that you believed a suspect was trying to send you a message, what suspect were you referring to?
I don't see that in the,
I'll circle it for you on the exhibit, if your counsel has no objection.
No objection.
You see what I circled?
yes.
What suspect did you believe? We'll strike that. A suspect to what type of crime did you believe was trying to send you a message?
I'm going to object. This line of questioning is argumentative, and the words coming from Officer Thompson aren't the exact replication of what Mr. Hawk represented to Mr. Thompson.
You may answer, Mr. Hawk. Do you remember my question?
Yeah, I'm not certain.
So, at least by the 26th of January 2012, you were not aware personally of any crime being committed on January 12th, 2010. True enough?
Yes.
Now, looking at the bottom of page 3 of Exhibit 16, we see that we're now into the report authored by Shalhoub during his contact with you. Do you see at the top where it says writer then contacted Hawk?
Yes.
Did you tell Officer Shalhoub that you observed Mrs. Matouk sitting on the break wall of Lakeshore Avenue?
I believe so when he called.
You didn't tell anybody at Grosse Pointe Farms during your interview on the 18th of January 2010 that you positively identified Mrs. Matouk Romain as the person on the break wall, did you?
I didn't know who that person was at that time.
All right. And likewise, when you turned in your written statement on January 19th, 2010, you did not identify the person as being Mrs. Matouk Romain on the break wall, correct?
Correct.
How was it, strike that, sometime before January 25th, 2012, but after January 19th, 2010, did you determine the woman in black clothing on the break wall was JoAnn Matouk Romain?
I believe there were photographs in the newspaper that resembled the woman that I saw that night.
So you never saw the face of JoAnn Matouk Romain on the breakwater down on the 12th of January 2010, correct?
Correct.
So you speculated after photos were published in various mediums with the picture of JoAnn Matouk Romain that the person you saw was indeed her, correct?
The photos strongly resembled the person I saw that night.
Well, what in the photos, strike that. We have some photographs that were marked, I believe, in part to Exhibit 12. Could either you or your counsel find Exhibit 12? And what is Exhibit 11 as well? Yeah, find Exhibit 11 and Exhibit 12. You see Exhibit number 12?
11, 12. Yes.
Okay, on the back side, there's a photograph. All right, what's the date of that article below the two photographs?
July 18th, 2014.
All right, so at least you didn't see these photographs at or before the time that you were speaking with Officer Shalhoub on January 25th, 2012, correct?
Correct.
Now, looking at Exhibit 11, is that one of the photographs that you saw before January 25th, 2012 that let you conclude that the woman you saw on the break wall was JoAnn Matouk Romain?
No, I believe it was a photograph that was published in a newspaper.
Was she wearing winter clothing in the newspaper publication?
I think it was just a headshot or,
From breast upward,
yeah, sort of,
kind of like this one on Exhibit 11?
yes.
All right, but you never saw the front of the individual that was sitting on the break wall on January 12th, 2010,
No, but I can
correct?
see right here on these photographs, like I said, the slope of the shoulders matches exactly, and the hair, the length, the color of the hair.
Have you seen any of the photographs of JoAnn's body when it was recovered from the Detroit River?
No, I haven't.
Is it your testimony? Strike that. Are you aware that JoAnn Matouk Romain was wearing a hat on the evening of January 12th, 2010?
Say that again.
Did you see the hat JoAnn Matouk Romain was wearing on the 12th of January,
No, I
2010?
don't recall a hat.
Well, do you recall a hairdo that looked permed and fluffy like we see on the 11th, Exhibit 11? Was that what her hair looked like that evening?
I remember dark, shoulder-length hair.
All right. But you never saw her face, correct?
Correct?
So regardless of what photograph you saw of JoAnn Matouk Romain's face anytime after January 12, 2010, right up to the current date, really is of no value to you because you never saw her face, correct?
I don't believe so. I saw the woman. I got a good look at her body shape. Like I said, the slope of her shoulders and her hair.
Wasn't she stooped over on the break wall when you saw her?
Yeah, she was sitting like that.
All right. Did you see a photograph of her slumped over like that you just demonstrated?
No?
No. How many photos did you see? Strike that. Who provided you with the photos that allowed you to conclude that you saw Mrs. Matouk, as you told Officer Shalhoub?
They were in newspaper publications.
Just the newspapers, publications?
Yes?
The Abood law firm didn't show you any photographs of JoAnn and ask you if that's the person you saw?
I don't believe so. But when I first met Michelle and her sister, I could see the very striking resemblance to their mother.
How could you tell? Because you never saw her mother's face, ever. Did Michelle provide you with photographs of her mother?
I don't believe so, no.
Did anybody at 1-800-LAW FIRM show you photos of JoAnn Matouk Romain?
I don't believe so.
How long, in your mind's eye, do you believe you actually looked at the figure that you've described on the break wall on January 12th, 2010. How long did you look at that person?
Seconds to a minute.
30 seconds to a minute. So if I start counting 1001, 1002, 1003, you would get up, I would have to reach 1060. That's as long as it took you to move around that scene that night? Or does that include only the time you saw the individual on the break wall and additional time was spent by you going around the scene that night? How much time did you witness the entire event that evening of January 12th, 2010?
Probably about a minute.
A minute. And during that minute, you were at least in part looking at a license plate for a license plate number and a municipal X, correct? And during that time, you saw two gentlemen move around two parked cars, correct?
Yes.
And during that time, you saw one gentleman reach into his coat and likewise reach into his pocket and then subsequently motion you around, correct?
Yes.
And then you subsequently saw another individual come around the second parked car and you had a shock, if you will, because it looked like JoAnn Matouk, correct?
It wasn't a shock.
It didn't startle you at all?
No.
All right, but you saw somebody that looked like someone you hadn't seen since high school, JoAnn Matouk, correct?
Yes.
And as you're making all of these observations, two men by the curb of Lakeshore, a license plate, a man coming around blocking the license plate, the man putting his hand inside his coat, then inside his pocket, a second man coming around. While you're making those observations, you're not observing the figure on the break wall, are you? Yes or no?
I believe she was still within line of sight.
Are you testifying that you took your focus off someone that you're claiming threatened you by implying they had a gun and looked at the woman on the break wall as opposed to focusing on that individual? Are you saying you saw this person on the break wall the entire time frame? You came to almost a stop, then went around to the left and moved past the vehicles and then went on your way. You saw her entirely that full time. Is that your testimony?
My testimony is I saw the woman first, then I saw the first man come around. I passed the Lexus, I looked back, saw the woman again, saw the second man.
So you weren't watching the woman the entire time, correct?
Yes.
All right. Now,
George, we can do a spot, like a 5 minute break.
what's that?
Or you could do a spot where we can take a break, and then a 5 minute break.
We can do it. Let's go off the record.
Off the record, 3:13.